Build scripts are the foundation of every Linux packaging system. Oftentimes, though, they're just not really readily available to the average user. They exist somewhere, but knowing where that somewhere is might be a bit of a challenge. There are some notable exceptions, though. One of those is Arch Linux. If you go and do a package search and you come to something like CMatrix, if you go to source files, this is going to take you to a GitLab when it decides to load, and then right here, we have the package build. And in the case of the AUR, it's even easier to find. Right here, view package build, and it takes you directly to it. And even if the AUR didn't do that, when you install a package from the AUR, you aren't installing an actual package, you are downloading the build script and then running that locally on your system, so it's going to be easy to find anyway. And this is really nice for me because I am a big fan of the Arch Linux package build system. Even if you don't understand the format, you're going to work it out pretty quickly. Reading like one or two of these, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's basically just a series of bash functions for the steps to install the application. It's not using any like weird, complicated macros you need to read documentation for. Yes, there is documentation for it, and that is useful as well, but you can kind of just wing it and get something that pretty much just works. There was one fairly important legal question that hadn't ever really been answered. What license are these build scripts actually under? Now you might say, well, why does the build script actually need a license? Isn't it common sense that anyone should be able to use them, anyone should be able to modify them, anyone should be able to fork them? Whilst we do talk about licenses in the concept of programs most of the time, they do also apply to documentation as well, and build scripts are an extension of that. The thing is that legally, common sense isn't a thing. You can't just say, well, it's common sense that everyone should be able to use them, and then that's just how that gets applied. Because in many jurisdictions, without a declaration otherwise, everything is all rights reserved. Now, you might also say, okay, I guess just make them public domain and be done with it. And that would make sense in some countries like the United States. But it's not as simple as it sounds. The definition for what can and cannot be public domain, along with different regions treating the public domain as a different thing, or in some cases, not even having a concept of a public domain, makes this a weird legal grey area when you're dealing with worldwide software. For example, in Germany, you can't go and say, I want to go and attribute this to the public domain. This is based on the life of the author. You don't have any control over it. And in Australia, the idea of the public domain isn't really a thing. It's, again, a weird legal grey area. And this is exactly why licenses like the unlicensed aren't exactly recommended. This makes a specific mention of the public domain, making this license not really viable in countries like Germany, in Australia being a legal grey area, and then just not being super nice in a lot of other countries. It's why Google employees are not allowed to contribute code to unlicensed projects. So going with a license like that probably isn't the best of ideas. Now, a little while back, Arch Linux opened up an RFC attempting to address this package build licensing issue, and then recently also passed it. Licensed package sources from August 7th, 2024. Our package sources currently do not have explicit licenses. This RFC proposed to license all Arch Linux package sources under the terms of the Zero Clause BSD license. Now, people often describe the Zero Clause BSD, the BSD 0, the 0 BSD, all names for the same license, as a public domain equivalent license. Now, this doesn't mean it does public domain attribution, and this is a big reason why it is greatly preferred over something like the unlicensed. These are the specific terms. Now, whilst it is called a BSD license, if you know your licensing, you would realize this is very much derived from the MIT world. Permission to use, copy, modify, and or distribute the software for any purpose, with or without fee, is hereby granted. The software is provided as is, and the author disclaims all warranties with regard to this software, including all implied warranties or merchantability and fitness. In no event shall the author be liable for any special, direct, indirect, or consequential damages, or any damages whatsoever resulting from loss of use, data, or profits, whether in an action of contract, negligence, or other tortious action arising out of or in connection with the use or performance of this software. As you may have noticed, nowhere in this license does it mention the term public domain. And there's a good reason for that. This effectively gives you the same right as something that would be in the public domain, but there are places that don't like public domain, that don't have the same definition of public domain. So you want to give people those same rights without getting into legal, weird gray areas in those countries that don't like the concept or have different definitions of the same concept. This is the same reason why there are licenses like the MIT No Attribution license. If you weren't sure that BSD0 was MIT derived, this should basically tell you that. This right here is literally the same thing because these both come from the general MIT license. The main difference with the MIT No Attribution is there is also an explicit clause allowing sub-licensing. Now, keep one very important thing in mind. Neither I nor the person writing the RFC are lawyers, so take everything we say with a giant grain of salt. Arch Linux package sources, package build, and strictly related files such as .install, .desktop, or systemd files currently lack a license. Obviously, not talking about the source code of the things they are packaging. This is potentially problematic as it leaves the licensing of the package sources open to interpretation. Some users have expressed concerns about this, linking to a mailing list discussion from 2011, along with a slightly more recent discussion from the world of Parabola. There it loaded. This is basically Arch Linux minus all of the proprietary software. So basically a broken Arch Linux, but hey, if people want to run it, like, they can go and do that. On the flip side of this, some people argue that the package sources are not significant enough to be copyrightable. Now, there is a valid argument to be made here. If there is only one correct way to compile an application or to install an application, to build an application, I think you can make a fair argument for that. Like, it's the same reason why Hello World is also not copyrightable, because there's only one correct way in a language to write the Hello World idea. Package sources may or may not be copyrightable. Whether they are may even vary from one jurisdiction to another. This is the other key point. People usually talk about something in the United States or something in Europe, but we don't have worldwide laws, and whilst there's agreement on a lot of things, you know, murder bad. Like, we can't agree on the punishment for that. And the exact same is true in copyright as well. Every country has an idea of copyright, but the way they approach it isn't necessarily the same. For instance, Tuchman Law argues that Hello World programs are not copyrightable since they leave no room for creativity. The same could be said about trivial package builds. If you have a Python script that relies on internal Python libraries, the package build for this is going to basically be download the script, put the script in the location to run it, and that's pretty much it. But on the flip side, I've said that twice in this video now. We're not going to do that again. In contrast, a complex 500-line package build is more likely to count as a creative work. Most of our package sources will be somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. If you have something this long, there are likely more than one way of actually doing it correctly. Thus, if package sources are copyrightable, at least in some cases, we should assign a license to all of them to be on the safe side. If they are not copyrightable, the license would not matter much, as the license would just not apply then. As such, we only stand to gain by assigning a license, and making sure it's not a license like the unlicensed, which could cause additional problems down the line. Both ZeroBSD and MIT No Attribution are well-accepted licenses for doing this task of effectively putting in the public domain without saying public domain. Now, whilst using ZeroBSD or a similar license isn't exactly common for package repos, it's not to say that other package repos don't go and apply a license. Actually, pretty much all the major ones do. So in Void Linux, they use a 2-clause BSD license. The same is done over on FreeBSD as well. Gentoo uses a GPL v2 license. They don't actually have the explicit text written here, but they say that is what they go and use. Nix Packages goes and uses the MIT license. OpenSUSE does something a bit weird. They go and declare the source uses the same license as the package itself, unless the package is proprietary, in which case then it just goes and uses MIT. So if you go and have a GPL v2 project, the package build, the build script for it is going to be GPL v2. If it's an Apache project, it's Apache. If it's Discord, then they go and apply MIT to it. On Debian, they use a standardized machine-readable file which assigns licenses to every file in the package source. It seems that many packages reuse the upstream license for the build instructions, though that is not always the case. So Debian might not have a clear set of guidelines for this, but because they have this idea of applying a license to every file, it kind of just gets done anyway. Now, Fedora is covered by the Fedora Project Contributor Agreement. By default, an MIT license is going to be applied. However, if for some reason you want to go and use a different license, that is an option as well. Now, Alpine, they don't actually apply a license, but they have had an open issue about this for 6 years now. It's had a bit of discussion here and there and all of these little things, and as of the Arch discussion, this has reopened up and maybe is gonna possibly get resolved. Now, choosing the license to use is one thing. I don't see any issue with the ZeroBSD license. It seems like a perfectly valid choice. The other issue, though, is getting permission to actually apply that license. So the plan is to get a list of every maintainer and every contributor, hope their emails are actually up to date, because there's going to be some old ones that probably aren't, and then send an email to every author containing a list of all their package contributions and inform them about the new license. Ask them to either do nothing and thereby consent to license all their contributions under ZeroBSD, or to object within 4 months. The email should have a reply to set to the aforementioned GitLab project service desk right here. Now, if they do object, then you gotta rewrite those parts of the package builds, and hopefully no one objects. Now, the AUR is a tad bit different. The AUR currently specifies that all packages in it could be elevated to official repositories. This implies that their license need to allow for this eventuality. As such, we should explicitly require their package sources share the same license as the official packages before they become eligible for promotion. This RFC does not specify that all AUR packages will be required to have the expected license. If they do not have them, however, they are not eligible for promotion. So if it gets to a point where some random application is ready to be promoted, it has a lot of users, it has a lot of stars, all that stuff is all good. You ask the maintainer, you ask the contributors, hey, are you okay with ZeroBSD? If they say yes, then it can be promoted. If they say no, well, they don't get promoted. Now, there is a drawback with the approach for the main repos. We're getting consent via lack of objection. This may or may not be less legally bulletproof compared to asking every past contributor for explicit consent. An earlier version of this RFC proposed asking every contributor for consent directly. However, this was deemed infeasible. It was estimated this would take about 1,100 hours of manual work. So, you know, a little bit infeasible. I don't know about you. However, the approach they're taking now of automatically licensing if you don't say no, also might be a weird legal area as well, as brought up on the GitLab discussion. I've read through the proposed license, and I am a lawyer that has practiced for 28 years. Consent by no answer or no response isn't a thing. It isn't any type of consent. This potentially creates more problems. Simply look at the number of tech companies that have been sued successfully for magic consent surrounding privacy issues. Copyright is no different. Now, I have no doubt that this is true, but what they are banking on is this observation from the parabola discussion. It would be very difficult for anyone to claim, I did not know or did not intend that these would be shared freely for use and modification by anyone in the world. It is generally assumed by Arch users that every contributor to every recipe in Arch and the AUR knows fully that the work will be published freely for public use, and that anyone with a copy is most likely to have taken it, specifically with intent to modify it, and that no special permission is required to do so. Is this a bulletproof legal defense? Probably not, but do I legitimately think that anyone would pursue Arch Linux over the license of their package build? No? So it's probably fine? Probably. Again, not a lawyer. With that being said then, the one question that has not been sufficiently answered is why. Because other distros are doing it, isn't a legal reason. It may be a feel-good, keeping up with the Joneses reason, but it really isn't a reason for or against doing anything. Neither is because somebody somewhere might require a license at some unknown point in the future. The reason is because absent a license, all rights are retained by the author or creator. If absolutely nobody is interested in pursuing a legal case against Arch Linux, again, it's operating in a weird legal gray area depending on the country, but adding a license isn't necessarily something they have to do. It's never been something that they've had to deal with the entire life cycle of Arch Linux, so it's probably not going to become a problem in the future. Do I think this is a bad decision to do, though? No, I think having a clear license there is a good thing, and this is probably going to be a good thing going into the future. But is it a problem that had to be dealt with? Probably not. At least that's my take. But what do you think? Do you think this is a problem they actually needed to deal with, or do you think it would have been fine just leaving it as it is? And what do you think about the ZeroBSD license? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out Patreon, subscribe to the Libero Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and I can't think. Zero thoughts. There we go.
Like this.